Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome to my reread of Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters. I am so hyped to read this because when I finished watching the episode, we check into CC's Spa and Resort. It was such a well written episode. To be completely honest, at the start, I was kind of like, what's happening? Mostly because Percy's island had men around, and I was like, uh, okay, okay, let's see what they have to share with us. What is the goal of changing something this significant when it comes to a specific character and a Greek myth at that? But then I really started vibing with it and enjoying with it because it showed in some way sense of form a cycle of growth. Like, you are not going to be stuck in the same cycle. You get the opportunity to grow, and there are times where growth and healing is not linear. We see Cersei as someone who has stopped turning people into pigs, into animals, but then with Percy, when Percy threatens her, she does end up turning him into a pig, into a guinea pig, almost instinctively. It shows that, once again, that growth is not linear, but it also kind of goes to show that she's true to her roots, because if she had completely healed as an individual, she wouldn't have kept those animals there in the first place. The second she realized that, okay, you know what, I'm done with my healing and I'm ready to get started with actually helping people, she would have turned all those guinea pigs, taken them to a far side of the island, put them in a boat or their ship, made them to sail away, and then, because we know her magic works long distance because she took the beeswax away from Annabeth, she could have turned them into animals and then warded the entire island so that they don't come back and attack her. It kind of goes to show that she's still growing and healing. It is also kind of tricky because if she really genuinely wanted to help people, she wouldn't keep them stuck there. So it kind of shows that she is a very flawed character and continues to be a flawed character. But at the end of the day, there is this opportunity for her to grow and evolve as a person. She's getting there. It's taking her a long time to get there, but she's getting there. She's at least started the journey, which goes to say a lot, because we know that a lot of the Greek gods and myths are kind of like stuck as they are. They don't change, they don't evolve, they don't shift. So it was really nice to see that. Oh my god, the Polyphemus reveal that he was not duped by Grover was kind of crazy. The way he tricked Clarice was crazy. The Athena reveal, the sirens was crazy. I was like, oh my god, what is happening? Because they did shift the fact that Annabeth dreams a different reality as opposed to the reality that we see here. And I kind of vibe with this one just a tad bit more, because one of the ongoing themes as a Percy Jackson fan is we sometimes see these characters, especially in the books, and it makes sense, they're kids, right? But we see these characters walk into traps and we are genuinely sitting here like, what are you doing? Stop it. You don't have to go there. You can stop now, go back. This is genuinely a trap. How are you guys not figuring this out? And so that has been something that, we kind of are like, laugh about it. There are memes about it and jokes about it. But once again, understandable because they're kids and we are viewing this from a very adult perspective. But this time around, I genuinely was like, holy shit, I would have gotten trapped in both of those cases. With Clarice not realizing that Polyphemus can change voices and was voicing Grover until the very last second, I would have gotten trapped. With Athena being there and the sirens creating a trap within a trap, I would have gotten trapped in that. Because I was honestly cheering on Athena. I was like, such a good mom. Yay, A plus parenting. I mean, like, you're doing the bare ass minimum. And we don't really know what made you shift from last season where you were like, okay, let them die at the arch, to where we are right now. But I was also like, okay, yeah, fine. The gods are temperamental. They change, they evolve, they have mood swings, whatever. I was happy with it until I realized that it was a trap. So just wanted to say, this is such a long intro, but that was such A plus writing, and I'm hyped to actually read the book and see what happens in the book. Do once again a comparison made out of love, because it is very hype for me as a reader to get these different experiences. Not only do I have a nostalgic memory of what happened in the book, I am also getting to see new versions of the same story being told, which is always hype, and which is once again at the core of what Percy Jackson is. It's stories being told and retold in different ways, in different forms. And it's really, really hype. So I can't wait to actually read this book and see what actually happened in the book. Today we are going to be reading chapter numbers 12 and 13. We check into CC's Spa and Resort. and Annabeth tries to swim home. It's going to be really hype. Let's get started. I didn't remember this. When Percy asks for Tyson in the rowboat, she goes, "He may have survived," she said half heartedly. "I mean, fire can't kill him." I nodded, but I had no reason to feel hopeful. I think that's really cool to read this because here we get a bit more of a depth in Percy's mind about how he feels about Tyson's death, whereas the show can't actively show us what's going on in Percy's head. So when Percy goes, "We lost everything," it kind of hits harder because we are getting to hear him say that out loud and not just fill in the gaps about what's happening inside his head. So I really like that. He had given his life for us, and all I could think about were the times I had felt embarrassed by him and had denied that the two of us were related. Oh. The fact that Annabeth had fished Percy out of the water is kind of crazy because I think this is something that I wanted to see in the show. But once again, it kind of made sense that Annabeth was also kind of ripped away in the hurricane, and they find both Percy and Annabeth drifting in the water, whereas here Annabeth was conscious when they were in the lifeboat, and she was the one who was twisting the cap of Hermes's flask. So it makes sense that she was conscious enough to fish Percy out of the sea. Percy and Annabeth are talking about Percy's latest dream about Grover, and "Yeah," I said bitterly, "you can never trust a Cyclops." Annabeth stared across the water. "I'm sorry, Percy, I was wrong about Tyson, okay? I wish I could tell him that." "Annabeth, what's Chiron's prophecy?" I honestly didn't remember him asking this. Oh my god. She pursed her lips. "Percy, I shouldn't. I know Chiron promised the gods he wouldn't tell me, but you didn't promise, did you? Knowledge isn't always good for you. Your mom is the wisdom goddess." "I know, but every time heroes learn the future, they try to change it and it never works. The gods are worried about something I'll do when I get older, I guess. Something when I turn 16. Annabeth twisted her Yankees cap in her hands. "Percy, I don't know the full prophecy, but it warns about a half-blood child of the big three. The next one who lives to the age of 16. That's the real reason Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades swore a pact after World War II not to have any more kids. The next child of the big three who reaches 16 will be a dangerous weapon. Why? Because that hero will decide the fate of Olympus. He or she will make a decision that either saves the age of the gods or destroys it." I let that sink in. I don't get seasick, but suddenly I felt ill. "That's why Kronos didn't kill me last summer," she nodded. "You could be very useful to him. If he can get you on his side, the gods will be in serious trouble." This is honestly crazy. I genuinely do not have any memory of them actively discussing the prophecy. Oh my god. Annabeth is like, "There's nobody alive who it could be except you. Then why do the gods even let me live? It would be safer to kill me." "You're right. Thanks a lot." Oh my god, hilarious conversation. Percy, I don't know. I guess some of the gods would like to kill you, but they are probably afraid of offending Poseidon. Other gods, maybe they're still watching you, trying to decide what kind of hero you're going to be. You could be a weapon for their survival after all. The real question is, what will you do in 3 years? What decision will you make? Oh, there is a lady with a clipboard, and she looks Percy and Annabeth up and down critically. An herbal wrap to start for the young lady, and of course, a complete makeover for the young gentleman. You know what that makeover is? It's Percy into a guinea pig. Oh my god. It's like so cool to kind of reread these books and knowing what you know about the story and seeing all these hints along the way earlier on in the chapters kind of crazy, and I really really love it. Now here's the thing, Annabeth and I were used to traps, and usually those traps looked good at first, so I expected the clipboard lady to turn into a snake or a demon or something any minute. But on the other hand, we had been floating in a rowboat for most of the day. I was hot, tired, and hungry, and when this lady mentioned a luau, my stomach sat up on its hind legs and begged like a dog. "I guess it couldn't hurt," Annabeth muttered. Oh my god. They're like trap versus food. Food. I mean, to be fair, all they've had to eat or sip on is one can of Dr. Pepper. That's all they've had since morning, and it has been hot. So fair. Fountains sprayed water into the air, forming impossible shapes like flying eagles and galloping horses. Tyson loved horses, and I knew he would love those fountains. I almost turned around to see the expression on his face before I remembered. Tyson was gone. God. Cece smiled benevolently. "My dear, you're lovely, really, but you're not showing off yourself or your talents at all. So much wasted potential." "Wasted? Well, surely you're not happy the way you are." "My goodness, there's not a single person who is. But don't worry, we can improve anyone here at this Hila will show you what I mean. You, my dear, need to unlock your true self. Annabeth's eyes glowed with longing. I'd never seen her so much at a loss for words. But what about Percy? Oh, definitely, Cece said, giving me a sad look. Percy requires my personal attention. He needs much more work than you. See, this is the thing. Like, as readers, we go, shit, this is so condescending, and they're definitely in a trap. But then Percy and Annabeth are kind of lulled into this magical, hypnotic state of like wanting to please her, and her voice has magic, and it talks about things like moonlight in the olive groves, and it's really cool. The magic is kind of hypnotizing them further. And the very first impression Annabeth has of Cece is her working on a loom. And as a daughter of Athena, and Athena is the one who kind of invented the loom, she wants to impress her, right? Like in Annabeth's mind, Cece has suddenly become someone who is a placeholder for Athena. Not permanently. It's like a step up, right? Like there's Cece and then there is Athena. So it's just layers upon layers, man. I love it. I think I like both versions of Cece's mirror. I might like the version we saw in the show just a tad bit more because it was more grief oriented, and Cersei really did want to help Percy become better. Like, not completely and not without ulterior motives in mind. She did have ulterior motives of keeping them stuck there for as long as she could. Absolutely get that. But I kind of preferred that because it kind of gave us a deeper exploration of Percy's grief over Tyson. Here, the mirror that Percy stands in front of, Cece shows him his biggest insecurities about himself, like his clothes, the first zit that had cropped up on his nose at the beginning of the school year, or the fact that his two front teeth weren't perfectly even, or that his hair never stayed down straight. And then she snaps her fingers, a sky blue curtain rolls down. He sees a reflection, but not a reflection. Shimmering there on the cloth was a cooler version of Percy Jackson, with just the right clothes, a confident smile on his face. His teeth were straight, no zits, a perfect tan. More athletic, maybe a couple of centimeters taller. It was me, without the falls. And this sucks because the version that we are getting in the book for a teenager, that is the dream, right? Like seeing yourself without any flaws. And which teenager hasn't dreamed of that, right? Like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have any blemishes on my face, I should be thin and strong and this and that and blah and blah. Like, it's understandable. Every single teenager has gone through that, with that sense of insecurity that comes with not fitting in and wanting to fit in a specific way. But then what Uncle Rick also does is tells us that flaws are inherent. It's natural to be flawed, and it's okay to be flawed as long as you work on it. And oh, it's kind of crazy. I really like it. Like, at least that's my interpretation of it. You love me just the way I am, don't you? Don't you? I guarantee you'll see the results immediately. And Percy goes, how is that possible? She laughed. Why question it? I mean, don't you want the perfect you right away? Something nagged at the back of my mind. Why are there no guys at the spa? Oh, but there are, Cece assured me. You'll meet them quite soon. Just try the mixture, you'll see. I looked at the blue tapestry, at the reflection of me, but not me. Now, Percy, Cece chided. The hardest part of the makeover process is giving up control. You have to decide, do you want to trust your judgment about what you should be, or my judgment? Ah, crazy stuff. When I pigs Percy Jackson, I used to turn them into real pigs, but they were so smelly and large and difficult to keep. Not much different than they were before, really. Guinea pigs are much more convenient. Now come and meet the other men. Oh, crazy stuff. Tomorrow, if you'll behave, you'll be on your way. There is always a classroom in need of a new guinea pig. Oh my god. Serious crazy stuff. I don't remember this. I thought she just kept them locked there forever. But she's like, no, I can transport you somewhere else where you'll be stuck like this forever with no way out. This is really cool. Annabeth just got the chance to become immortal and she takes that away from Percy. And it is such a cool parallel to what happens later on at the end of the series. Oh, crazy stuff. Hear this. Stay with me, Cece was telling Annabeth. Study with me. You can join our staff, become a sorceress, learn to bend others to your will. You will become immortal. But you are too intelligent, my dear, Cece said. You know better than to trust that silly little camp of yours. How many great female half-blood heroes can you name? Atlanta, Emilia Earhart, bah. Men get all the glory. Cece closed her fist and extinguished the magic flame. The only way to power for women is sorcery. Media, Calypso, now there were powerful women. And me, of course, the greatest of all. Oh, crazy stuff. Love it. Let me think about it. Annabeth murmured, just give me a minute alone to say goodbye. Of course, my dear Cece could. 1 minute. Oh, and so you have absolute privacy? She waved her hand and iron bars slammed down over the windows. She swept out of the room and I heard the locks on the door click shut behind her. Annabeth drawing her knife against Cece as Cece comes back into the room flanked by two of her business suited attendants. Really, little girl, a knife against my magic. Is that wise? Run, I wanted to tell Annabeth, but all I could make were rodent noises. I had the urge to panic and hide too, but I had to think of something. I couldn't stand to lose Annabeth the way I had lost Tyson. Shut up! So cool! Annabeth takes a yellow chewable, and when Cersei is like, oh, what will Annabeth's makeover be? Something small and ill tempered. I know, a shrew. Blue fire coiled around her fingers, curling like serpents around Annabeth. I watched horror struck, but nothing happened. Annabeth was still Annabeth, only angrier. She leaped forward and struck the point of her knife against Cersei's neck. How about turning me into a panther instead? One that has her claws at your throat. Cersei howled in frustration. Curse Hermes and his multivitamins. Those are such a fad. They do nothing for you. I just ate a flower, one that takes your power. So you better cower now and flee. You must be a liar. Mortals can't acquire Molly without dire consequence. Well, I must be a god like you, 'cause I got this root from the ground with my bare hands. Hermes gave it to you, didn't he? Yeah, fine. Okay, but regardless, you and I are now evenly matched. Our fates are intertwined, they're attached. I've got people to protect. Names I caught in black. Another's going back. You make your one wrong move, then you're done for. Anything you don't approve, then you're done for. I can put a spell on you and you're done for. Boy, you better run or soon you will be done for. Oh. Annabeth dragging Cersei over to the guinea pig cage, knocking the top off and pouring the rest of vitamins inside. Oh, let's go! Let's go! Power moves. I love it. Annabeth sheathed her knife and glared at me. Thanks, I faltered. I am really sorry. Before I could figure out how to apologize for being such an idiot, she tackled me with a hug, then pulled away just as quickly. I'm glad you're not a guinea pig. Me too. I hope my face wasn't as red as it felt. Ugh. Cutie pies! I couldn't explain. I just somehow knew an old sailing vessel was the best bet for me. I looked around at the hopeless maze of sail and ropes. The ship was in great condition for a 300-year-old vessel, but it would still take a crew of 50 several hours to get underway. We didn't have several hours. I could see the pirates running down the stairs. I closed my eyes and concentrated on the waves lapping against the hull, the ocean currents, the winds all around me. Suddenly, the right word appeared in my mind. Mizzenmast, I yelled. Annabeth looked at me like I was nuts. But in the next second, the air was filled with whistling sounds of ropes being snapped taut, canvases unfolding, and wooden pulleys creaking. Annabeth ducked as a cable flew over her head and wrapped itself around the bowsprit. Percy, how? I didn't have an answer, but I could feel the ship responding to me as if it were a part of my body. I willed the sails to rise as easily as it were flexing my arm. I willed the rudder turn. The Queen Anne's Revenge lurched away from the dock, and by the time the pirates arrived at the water's edge, we were already underway sailing into the Sea of Monsters. And boom, that's a chapter. So, okay, here's the thing. I preferred both the book version and the show version of Cersei. Because, like I said at the start of this entire video, the show version of Cersei is someone who is healing and growing and evolving. Yes, she's falling back into the same traps, but she's also growing, which is something that's really huge when it comes to the world of gods and myths and monsters. This version is still stuck in the times of the past, but we get a deeper sense of danger when we are reading this because she's stuck in the ways of the past. She's more than happy to turn Percy into a guinea pig without there being any reason to, just the fact that he's a man. I'm just a man. And the fact that because Annabeth was not willing to bend to her will, she just as easily was ready to turn Annabeth into a shrew. So that's the thing, like it shows us the danger Cersei possesses and who she was back in the day. What the show did was give us the fact that, hey, so if you read the book, you get the Cersei of the past. If you watch the show, you get a Cersei who is healing. And so we get to understand that both of these versions of Cersei is Cersei at the end of the day. She is that dangerous. The show Cersei is just someone who's learned to wield her power differently and actually understand what she needed, which was heroes to stay where they were and not leave her all alone. But she's just as dangerous. So I absolutely love that. I feel like the show did such a better job at exploring the grief of Tyson's death on Percy. Whereas the book has like a few moments of Percy turning around when he sees horses and being like, oh, Tyson would have loved that. Or Percy being like, I didn't want to lose Annabeth just as I had lost Tyson. And at the very start of the chapter where he goes, all I could think about was how I had mistreated him or was embarrassed by him. And so we get like two or three instances of Percy's grief with Tyson. But in the show, the grief that we get is so much more powerful that it actively breaks your heart. So I really loved the show's exploration of Percy's grief over Tyson's death. One thing that I would have loved to see, and I think they might show it in the future episodes, is Percy taking over Queen Anne's revenge and how easily he could make the ship respond to his commands, get ready, and start sailing, which is huge, right? Because here's the thing, not a bad criticism on the show, but so far, every time we have seen Percy use water around him as a weapon or as a tool, it feels disjointed for me. Like the tidal wave that we see in the first season was like, huh, fun stuff, feels a bit weird or disjointed. Percy, when he was standing at the tip of the ironclad and trying to move the tides around, all you could see was water splashing on his face every few seconds. And so it doesn't feel like, oh, he was actively doing something, right? Like we don't genuinely see how he is moving the water around him to work with him. We get a much deeper exploration of the power that Percy has over the water because we see how he is working the water. We read about how he's working the water. In the first book, when he was fighting Ares, there is this entire paragraph about how Percy was pulling the water back and he could feel the tides pulling back. It was almost like pulling a catapult back or like pushing the water pressure back. Like we understand how it feels for him when he is working with water. We don't really get to see a lot of that in the show. We get like huge over the top instances or instances where it feels like okay, but it could be anything else. It doesn't seem like it is Percy wielding the water magic. You know what I mean? And so, if we do get a scene where Percy is actively manipulating a ship and working the ropes and all of that jazz so that the ship is ready to sail instantly, that CGI or visual elements of that would be such a huge way to boost Percy's magic and Percy's powers as a son of the sea god. Let me know down in the comments what you think about it. But yes, on to chapter number 13. Annabeth tries to swim home. I still felt changed, not just because I had sudden desire to eat lettuce. I felt jumpy, like the instinct to be a scared little animal was now a part of me. Or maybe it had always been there. That's what really worried me. Ooh, I love that. Ooh, we are finally getting Annabeth's backstory. Let's go. I thought it would happen when they were sailing to Cersei's Island, but it is after they were escaping Cersei's Island. Crazy. The reason you hate Cyclops is so much. The story about how Thalia really died. What happened? It was hard to see her expression in the dark. I guess you deserve to know, she said finally. The night Grover was escorting us to camp, he got confused, took some wrong turns. You remember he told you that once? I nodded. Well, the worst wrong turn was into a Cyclops' lair in Brooklyn. They've got Cyclopses in Brooklyn, I asked. You wouldn't believe how many, but that's not the point. This Cyclops, he tricked us. He managed to split us up inside this maze of corridors in an old house in Flatbush. And he could sound like anyone Percy, just the way Tyson did aboard the Princess Andromeda. He lured us one at a time. Thalia thought she was running to save Luke. Luke thought he heard me scream for help. And me, I was alone in the dark. I was 7 years old. I couldn't even find the exit. She brushed the hair out of her face. I remember finding the main room. There were bones all over the floor. And there were Thalia and Luke and Grover tied up and gagged, hanging from the ceiling like smoked hams. The Cyclops was starting a fire in the middle of the floor. I drew my knife, but he heard me. He turned and smiled. He spoke, and somehow he knew my dad's voice. I guess he just plugged it out of my mind. He said, "Now, Annabeth, don't you worry. I love you. You can stay here with me. You can stay forever." I shivered. The way she told it, even now, 6 years later, freaked me out. Worse than any ghost story I'd ever heard. What did you do? I stabbed him in the foot. I stared at her. Are you kidding? You were 7 years old and you stabbed a grown Cyclops in the foot? Oh, he would have killed me, but I surprised him. It gave me just enough time to run to Talia and cut the ropes on her hands. She took it from there. Yeah, but still, that was pretty brave, Annabeth. She shook her head. We barely got out alive. I still have nightmares, Percy. The way that Cyclops talked in my father's voice. It was his fault we took so long getting to camp. All the monsters who had been chasing us had time to catch up. That's really why Thalia died. If it hadn't been for that Cyclops, she would still be alive today. Oh, who? This is what I mean. Like, yes, the backstory that we got of Thalia, Luke, and Annabeth in the show was scary, but this is so much more scarier in the book because they were trapped in a maze, running around searching for each other to help. The Cyclops using Annabeth's dad's voice, like, "Oh, I love you forever, you can stay here now." For a 7-year-old kid, that's scary. And she still ended up going and stabbing him in the feet. That's crazy brave and courageous. But this is what I mean. Like, if this had happened to 7-year-old me, I would have been so much more freaked out than the show version of what we got. Like, if that had happened to 7-year-old me, I would have been freaked out. Don't get me wrong. I would have been scared shitless. But this is just such a deeper exploration of that and so much more traumatizing. And oh, I think I prefer the book version over the show version when it comes to the backstory. I kept thinking about Annabeth's story. I wondered if I were her, would I have had enough courage to go on this quest, to sail straight towards the lair of another Cyclops? Ooh, okay. Percy fell asleep and he was back in Luke's stateroom aboard the Princess Andromeda. Cronus's golden sarcophagus glowed faintly, the only source of light in the room. A cold laugh startled me. It seemed to come from miles below the ship. "You don't have the courage, young one. You can't stop me." I knew what I had to do. I had to open that coffin. I uncapped Riptide. Ghosts whirled around me like a tornado. Beware. My heart pounded. I couldn't make my feet move, but I had to stop Cronus. I had to destroy whatever is in that box. Then a girl spoke right next to me. "Well, Seaweed Brain?" I looked over, expecting to see Annabeth, but the girl wasn't Annabeth. She wore punk-style clothes with silver chains on her wrist. She had spiky black hair, dark eyeliner around her stormy blue eyes, and a spray of freckles around her nose. She looked familiar, but I wasn't sure why. "Well," she asked, "are we going to stop him or not?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. The girl rolled her eyes. "Fine, leave it to me and Aegis." Oh, I love that. Ah, crazy stuff. Knowing the fact that she doesn't actively take part in this prophecy later on, crazy stuff. Ooh, okay. So, no, I tried to warn her, but she didn't listen. She marched straight up to the sarcophagus and pushed aside the golden lid. For a moment, she stood there gazing down at whatever was in the box. The coffin began to glow. "No," the girl's voice trembled. "It can't be." From the depths of the ocean, Cronus laughed so loudly the whole ship trembled. "No," the girl screamed as the sarcophagus engulfed her in a blast of golden light. Ah, I sat bolt upright in my hammock. Okay, so here's the thing, okay. I don't know if Uncle Rick actually planned this quite early on, but if you are a book reader, spoiler for the future books, I am pretty sure Thalia just saw Luke inside the sarcophagus. That's crazy. Oh my god, like that's why she was hesitant to stabby Cronus. Oh my god, that's crazy stuff. Let's go. I really want to see this in the episodes in the future. Oh, that would be so freaky. Crazy, man. Percy and Annabeth are approaching the island of the Sirens. And Percy's like, "No problem, we can just top up our ears. There's a big tub of candle wax below that." "I want to hear them," I blinked. "Why?" "They say the Sirens sing the truth about what you desire. They tell you things about yourself you didn't even realize. That's what's so enchanting. If you survive, you become wiser. I want to hear them. How often will I get that chance?" Coming from most people, this would have made no sense. But Annabeth, being who she was, well, if she could struggle through ancient Greek architecture books and enjoy documentaries on the History Channel, I guess the silence would appeal to her too. And this is the thing, oh my god, okay. As a kid, when I was reading this, I was like, Annabeth, what are you doing? Just stock up your ears and leave. But then at the same time, she is the daughter of Athena, and wisdom is always going to be something that craves her. And this is honestly not the first time Annabeth has made a decision that kind of backfires, because we see this in the very first book. Annabeth decides to go sightseeing on the arch. There was no reason for them to do that. They could have just stayed in the train, waited it out, and gone away. But she decides to go to the arch because she wanted to see the architectural side of things, and how this was one of the greatest monument ever built in the name of Athena. Right here, we see her not plugging her ears in because she wanted to learn more about herself. In one of the future books, we see her actively fighting a sphinx because the sphinx gives her a riddle. She solves that riddle, but she's also pissed off about the fact that how could you give me such an easy riddle? Give me something that's worse. Give me something that's harder. I actually want this to be a challenge. And Percy and Grover are like, why? Just leave. Let's leave. So it's fun to see that this is a characteristic trait that stays with Annabeth, where she's like, don't insult me, and I am always going to want to learn more. Gaining more wisdom is something that will always make me stop and sometimes make dumb decisions. Don't untie me, she said. No matter what happens or how much I feel, I will want to go straight over the edge and drown myself. Are you trying to tempt me? Haha. Weirdos. Annabeth nodded sarcastically, letting me know the earplugs were a real fashion statement. I made a face at her and turned to the pilot's wheel. I glanced back. At first, Annabeth seemed totally normal. Then she got a puzzled look on her face, her eyes widened. She'd strained against the ropes. She called my name, I could tell just from reading her lips. Her expression was clear. She had to get out. This was life or death. I had to let her out of the ropes right now. She seemed so miserable it was hard not to cut her free. I forced myself to look away. I urged the Queen Anne's revenge to go faster. Oh. How could music cause so many lives to veer off course? I mean, sure, there were some top 40 songs that made me want to take a fiery nosedive, but still. What could the sirens possibly sing about? For one dangerous moment, I understood Annabeth's curiosity. I was tempted to take out the earplugs just to get a taste of the song. I could feel the sirens' voices vibrating in the timbers of the ship, pulsing around the roar of blood in my ears. Annabeth was pleading with me. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She strained against the ropes as if they were holding her back from everything she cared about. How could you be so cruel? She seemed to be asking. I thought you were my friend. Ah! Stop it! I wanted to uncap my sword, but there was nothing to fight. How do you fight a song? I tried hard not to look at Annabeth. I managed it for about 5 minutes. That was my big mistake. When I couldn't stand it any longer, I looked back and found a heap of cut ropes, an empty mast. Annabeth's bronze knife lay on the deck. Somehow she had managed to wriggle it into her hand. I had totally forgotten to disarm her. I screamed her name, but if she heard me, it didn't do any good. She was entranced, swimming straight towards her death. Imagine a flock of vultures the size of people, with dirty black plumage, grey talons, and wrinkled pink necks. Now imagine human heads on top of those necks, but the human heads keep changing. I couldn't hear them, but I could see they were singing. As their mouths moved, their faces morphed into people I knew. My mom, Poseidon, Grover, Tyson, Tyron, all the people I most wanted to see. They smiled reassuringly, inviting me forward. But no matter what shape they took, their mouths were greasy and caked with the remnants of old meals. Like vultures they'd been eating with their faces, and it didn't look like they'd been feasting on monster donors. Like, shut up, this is so scary for a 12-year-old. Percy's 12 years old right now. Oh my god, that's crazy. I knew I couldn't let Annabeth get out of the water. The sea was my only advantage. It had always protected me one way or another. I propelled myself forward and grabbed her ankle. The moment I touched her, a shock went through my body and I saw the sirens the way Annabeth must have been seeing them. Three people on a picnic basket in Central Park. A feast was spread out before them. I recognized Annabeth's dad from photos she had shown me, an athletic-looking, sandy-haired guy in his 40s. He was holding hands with a beautiful woman who looked a lot like Annabeth. She was dressed casually in blue jeans and a denim shirt and hiking boots. But something about the woman radiated power. I knew I was looking at the goddess Athena. Next to them sat a young man, Luke. The whole scene glowed in a warm, buttery light. The three of them were talking and laughing, and when they saw Annabeth, their faces lit up with delight. Annabeth's mom and dad held out their arms invitingly. Luke grinned and gestured for Annabeth to sit next to him, as if he had never betrayed her, as if he was still her friend. Behind the trees of Central Park, a city skyline rose. I caught my breath because it was Manhattan, but not Manhattan. It had been totally rebuilt from dazzling white marble, bigger and grander than ever, with golden windows and rooftop gardens. It was better than New York, better than Mount Olympus. I knew immediately that Annabeth had designed it all. She was the architect for a whole new world. She had reunited her parents, she had saved Luke. She had done everything she had ever wanted. Oh, this is what I mean. Like, I think the show had so much more of a trap value. Like, I genuinely got trapped with Athena being there. But the book is something straight out of a kid's biggest desires and dreams. But both hurt me equally. I am genuinely just as hurt. I felt more betrayed with the show when it was all a trap. Whereas in the book, I just feel sad and I feel like this layer of grief for Annabeth. And oh, both of these versions did such a good job at showing us what she truly desires. Two different versions of it, but just crazy good at the same time. Ah, I love it. We went under, and Annabeth stopped struggling. Her expression became confused. Then her head broke through the surface and she started to fight again. The water. Sound didn't travel well underwater. If I could submerge her long enough, I could break the spell of the music. Of course, Annabeth wouldn't be able to breathe, but at the moment, that seemed like a minor problem. Bubbles. I was desperate. I had to keep Annabeth alive. I imagined all the bubbles in the sea, always churning, rising. I imagined them coming together, being pulled towards me. The sea obeyed. There was a flurry of white, a tickling sensation all around me. And when my vision cleared, Annabeth and I had a huge bubble of air around us. Only our legs stuck into the water. She started to sob, I mean horrible, heartbroken sobbing. She put her head on my shoulder and I held her. Fish gathered to look at us, a school of barracudas, some curious marlins. Scram, I told them. They swam off, but I could tell they went reluctantly. I swear I understood their intentions. They were about to start rumors flying around the sea about the son of Poseidon and some girl at the bottom of Siren Bay. Crazy stuff. I really do wish that we had gotten to see this particular scene because it would have been so cool. You okay? I asked. The moment I said it, I realized how lame that sounded. Of course she wasn't okay. I didn't realize, she murmured. What? Her eyes were the same color as the mist around the Siren's island. How powerful the temptation would be. I didn't want to admit that I'd seen what the Sirens had promised her. I felt like a trespasser, but I figured I owed it to Annabeth. I saw the way you rebuilt Manhattan, I told her, and Luke and your parents. She blushed. You saw that? What Luke told you back on the Princess Andromeda about starting the world from scratch. That really got to you, huh? My fatal flaw. That's what the siren showed me. My fatal flaw is hubris. I blinked. That brown stuff they spread on veggie sandwiches? She rolled her eyes. No seaweed brain, that's hummus. Hubris is worse. What could be worse than hummus? This boy is stuck. He's like, I am hungry. Have you seen food anywhere recently? All I got to drink was strawberry milkshake and it turned me into a guinea pig and I didn't even get to munch on some celery. So, food. Don't you ever feel like what if the world really is messed up? What if we could do it all over again from scratch? No more war, nobody homeless, no more summer reading homework. I'm listening. The only thing that caught his ears was the summer reading homework part. Don't you ever feel that way? Like you could do a better job if you ran the world? No. Me running the world would kind of be a nightmare. This boy is nothing if not real. He's like, let me skateboard. That's all I want. We had reached the home of the Cyclopses. Oh, crazy stuff. Once again, I really enjoyed both the book and the show version. Like I said at the start of this video, somewhere during this video, it's giving us different retellings of the same myths, right? Different versions of the same story. And it's really cool to see that. And I still have such high hopes for the show. It hasn't disappointed me once. Like I was saying at the start of the episode, I was kind of like, hey, Men on Cersei's Island, kind of weird. But I got around to it and I really loved what they were trying to show us. So, good job overall. The Sirens, I feel like it would have been cool to see them as vultures in the show as well, but I get the rock formations and what they were trying to do, and that was cool in its own sense. Loved both versions of the visions Annabeth got. Dope storytelling, and I can't wait to see what comes next. We are going into the Cyclops' lair. I hope to see Tyson back. in the game. I want to see the fight between Tyson and Polyphemus and how Percy actually lets Polyphemus go, but then Polyphemus attacks. In the book, at least, that's what it happens. And that's mostly coming from Percy's wish of like, oh, Cyclopses, not all monsters are monsters. If I could, I would let them go. I know they might not delve into that because then it would be too much of a heavy dealing of not all monsters are monsters, but I want to see what they do with this particular moment. I'm really hyped to see it. So with all that said and done, I will see you in the reaction to episode 6 of Percy Jackson. Until then, like, share, subscribe, comment, and all of that jazz. And I wanted to let you know, I have a Patreon. It has extra bonus content. It has early access to all the videos that I'm creating and sharing with people. And if you like what I'm doing and if you want to support me, head on over there and become a patron. I shall see you over there. Until then, bye bye, toodaloo, lots of love.